Thank you so much. So now we go on to the program bit, and we would like to invite the speakers and the moderators of the Congress to come forward. First, Dr. Chitra and Dr. Koo. Please come and take your seats, and we'll have a little time, so we'll quickly go through the questions, and then you quickly give us your answers. Thank you so much. 2 questions for each of them, and actually we have 10 minutes for this sector, so it's actually 5 minutes per person. So Dr. Chitra, as you know, is a professor in NIE and very involved in bilingual education. So first question to you, now why it is important for children these days to be bilingual, and how can children be brought up as competent bilingual speakers and writers?
Well, basically you find that, I think if you look at the research findings, bilingual children exhibit higher intellectual growth. All right, they're very sensitive to language, and they have a better ear for listening. And of course, in a cosmopolitan world where everybody has to excel in the 21st century, it's always an asset to be a bilingual, because you're going to be more sensitive to cross-cultural communication. And I think in the employment circles, we all cannot deny the asset of having an additional language. All right. And generally, cognitively, you find that bilingual children are definitely more flexible in their thinking, and they have a wonderful ear for listening because they've been exposed to different languages. And of course, every culture has its own way of seeing the world. And as a result of learning 2 languages, you actually pick up different ways of looking at the world as well. And it's actually very enriching for the child. In terms of actually bringing up children to be bilingual, one of the key things that I have found out in my research is that children respond to learning 2 languages very quickly if they have demonstrations of functional utility of these languages in their lives. So if you put them in an environment where the 2 languages are extremely functional and it serves functional purposes, kids are going to pick up the language very quickly. Like for instance, I did a study on children, preschoolers in bilingual homes, and I'll narrate one of the anecdotes that I have. In one of the situations, you find, I looked at 5 preschoolers. Okay, the ones that were really bilingual, like for instance, in one of the homes, the child came from a fairly poor family. Everything that went on in the home was really in the second language, basically Tamil. But when the parents and the siblings addressed the child, they spoke to the child in English because they wanted him to be competent in English before he got to school. But this child was happily bilingual because apart from hearing English, everything in the home was in Tamil. There was Tamil songs, there was Tamil media, and of course there were a lot of people speaking in Tamil to each other. So because he saw the functional utility in both the languages, he picked up both. The opposite scenario is where you have a child where everybody was speaking in English, all right, but the mother spoke in Tamil to the child because she didn't want him to be disadvantaged in school. But this child was not very bilingual, and when I asked him why he didn't like, picking up the language, he said, look, I don't see any utility in it. Nobody around me uses it, no friends. My friends can speak to me in English. Everything I do is in English, so why should I learn another language? So I like to emphasize that the functional component is very important. The other thing, so immersing them in an environment where the language is functional is very important for them to acquire the language, especially in the early years. And the second thing is, of course, immerse them in print-rich environment where they get to listen to the language and have a lot of exposure to the language.
Next question. How does the preschool I think so. The next question would be, how does the Congress align with what you said?
Okay. I think in this Congress you find that, there will be a lot of professionals giving workshops, and there will be a lot of sessions for parents as well. And the focus of this Congress has been to give caregivers, parents, as well as teachers, a lot of practical tips as to how the language can be nurtured. It's everyday part of daily life. Like for instance, through play. I think you heard that, from Claire. And just daily activities, because they are really the best avenues for promoting the language. And of course, given that first 6 years are crucial, I think it's very important that we have these practical tips.
And time is up. Now, the next speaker, Dr. Koo Kim Joo, is a very well known, very involved in UNESCO work, United Nations work, World Bank work, and so on. So I don't want to talk so much on them. All the biodata is in our program. But I just want to ask Dr. Koo, why did she identify bilingualism as a main topic for this year's Congress?
Yeah, thank you. It's under pressure of time here, the chairman. Okay, I very much agree with what Chitra has mentioned, and I think what she said emphasized why we actually decided to choose or recommend very strongly to have bilingualism in the early years. And in fact, that was what I brought up because I went to the chairman here and I told him that, look, you haven't been focusing on the early years all this time. And said, sure, we can do that. And year 8, meaning that I got to be involved in the content and so on, which I happily and quite happy to be involved in. Now, Chitra has actually mentioned the reason why bilingualism is so important, and we know from research that actually bilingualism helps in terms of children's cognitive development. And we live in a multicultural, multi-language society as well, and it makes sense. And it's already happening. We are already bilingual or trilingual in school, in preschool as well, and also in infant centers. So children are already being exposed to 2 languages. But we are concerned about the quality of bilingualism, because we can be having 2 languages being spoken to the children, but the quality that comes out may not be really that great, because it's garbage in, garbage out, in other words. So you have to have role models who can speak good Mandarin,
and
good Tamil, and so on.
Wonderful. The next question I want to focus on is why this year particularly, you also, besides emphasizing bilingualism, you said preschool is certainly very important.
Yes, definitely preschool is very important, because the first 3 years especially, of course up to 6 years, and of course we are always learning beyond that, but it just gets a whole lot more difficult. The brain is developing, the brain is forming during the first 3 years very, very fast, and we want to take this opportunity, and this is the best time for children to pick up languages. And they soak it up. I've got kids who come in who don't speak English or Mandarin, they could be speaking French, it could be German or Tamil, but when they come in, they just listen to the languages, they don't understand it to start with. But we talk about functionality. The language you speak, the action you do that goes with it, the child eventually learns. And there are 3 things that I think I want to mention very strongly in terms of how children learn languages and anything else, is that it must be meaningful, functionality. It must be applicable in life, not only in school, but outside the school as well. And thirdly, it must be experiential. The child must experience that language, whether it is through hearing, through speaking, through using it in various ways.
And Dr. Koo, from there, could you please explain one more thing? Why do parents find the transition from preschool to primary school a difficult process?
Okay, I think it has to do with both the preschool and the primary school. What happens in the preschool that helps to prepare the child for primary school? What happens between the school and the preschool to help in that transition exposure? And the last one is what happens in the primary school itself. So I may not have time to elaborate here because it's going to cut me short. So I'm going to leave it till maybe if there are any questions later on.
Great, wonderful. I think you should not only wait to ask questions, you should come for the Congress. That's it. So next we will, thank you very much, Chitra and Dr. Koo. Thank you so much for your kindness. And I have the pleasure now to call upon Emily Lim and Stephanie Wong, illustrators and writers. Now, one of the greatest things I admire about children's book is that it's a combination of the work of a writer and illustrator. The literary work and the visual work medium comes together, like these 2 lovely people. Now, Emily Lim is a fantastic writer. Before becoming a writer, she was media director, public relations director, and of course, as a writer, I don't think she earns as much as she earned before, but nevertheless, she's a very happy person as a writer. And we all want to want to be happy, so we must be writing. Now, as I told you earlier, that this conference was migrating from one language to another language, from one way of writing to another way of writing. So here Emily has written more than 20 books. Some of them have been translated, some of them written in other media. Now, why do you think this is important, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. The rewards are purely non-financial. As an author, I want my books to be read as widely as possible. Crossing boundaries and borders allows me to do that. When I licensed the rights of my books to publishers in China, Malaysia and Korea, over the past 2 years, it opened me to new markets and it gave me a much wider reach. And of course, I have other publishers out there now who are pushing my books. Beyond licensing rights, there are really many other mediums that we can engage and reach out to the new readership. And that really can be through children's theatre, digital content, or other technology platforms. In fact, Prince Bear and Pauper Bear is going to be staged as the first children's mobile theatre in Singapore. And it's going to be launched at the AFCC. There's going to be a free theatre performance for the public. And this is actually staged by the Learning Connection. That's a theatre arts education specialist. So thereafter, they will do ticketed tours to schools, to community venues. And actually, we're already in early discussions to take the tours out of Singapore. I've also just entered into a collaboration with GLB. That's actually an educational technology company. And the next print run of my Prince Bear and Pauper Bear series will actually have embedded features in the books. So you take a smart pen and you can actually tap on the book pages and it reads to you and you can read after it. So it's a very interactive form of reading for young readers.
I think Emily's books are an example of how books from one media can cross into another. But coming to the conference, how do you think the conference would help others to cross from writing to other media?
I think the theme of One Big Story is very appropriate. Basically, it summarizes that your story content can be exploited through many, many different mediums. And AFCC does just that. They have brought together all the content creators, developers, and producers to come together to create one big story. Basically, our story doesn't end at the printed book anymore. Yes. And it translates and can become something much bigger.
Fantastic. And now from the world of writing to the world of visual media, Stephanie, now what do illustrators must keep in mind when they are illustrating from one media to another?
Okay, I'm going to keep this very brief.
Please.
Okay, let's say the story is the content, or to us as designer, illustrator, is the concept, is the idea behind everything. And illustration and the design, I say both because they're both very important when it comes to designing for books. It's the packaging. It's the packaging that goes along with the story. So what to keep in mind, what is good about illustration in this sense is that it goes beyond the barrier of language, like a Mr. Bean movie. I mean, it's visual, so we don't have to explain much, but it helps to sell the story and move the story along. How it moves into other medias like your game or TV series or iPad, or to sell it in India and all that, is when the illustrator has to keep in mind the intent of the story or the concept of the story and help translate that across in visually. So the style that is chosen, the characters that are being developed, and the typography that is used for the design of the book will set the tone, the meaning, and all that.
Wonderful. And going back to the program again, how does, what you have said, tie in with our programming?
Okay, from my experience or from what I see, we tend to dwell in our own little circle. So the illustrators have their own community, the writers have their own community, teachers and the media representative and publishers are all in their own little community. And we don't often go out and explore and talk to other people, but this offers us a chance to actually go out and meet writers, because we have to work rather closely together, put it this way. We haven't worked together, but maybe in future.
Yes, work happily together.
Yeah. So I think that helps with the sessions and all that. So we get to go and see what other writers are coming up with. Writers get to see different illustration styles and so on and so forth.
Wonderful. I think Asia represents wonderful illustration styles. So we have illustrators from Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, and Thailand coming. So please come along and share, hear them share their styles. Okay? Thank you very much, Emily, and certainly thank